episode of Pleasure Principles. I'm your host Avik, and today we are diving into a topic that many of us struggle with, but rarely talk about openly. It's a very common word, it's a single word, it is boundaries.
Mm.
Yeah. So, why is it that saying no feels so terrifying? Like, even when our whole body is screaming for it, why do we give away our time, our energy, even our joy, only to end up exhausted and resentful? Yeah. So, dear listeners, joining me is someone who knows this struggle intimately and has turned her story into a mission. So, please welcome my guest, Barb Nangle. So, welcome to the show, Barb.
Thank you so much, Avik. I am so grateful to be here. I appreciate you.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you so much for being on our show. And dear listeners, before we delve deep into the discussion today, I'll quickly love to introduce you with Barb. So, Barb is a boundaries coach, speaker, and the founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. So, she is also the host of the podcast Fragmented to Whole Life Lessons from 12 Step Recovery. So, her story is extraordinary. Like, after nearly 40 years of therapy and self help, it wasn't until she found her way into 12 step recovery at the age of 52 that her life transformed. So, from overcoming addiction, codependency, and self neglect to shedding 100 pounds and reclaiming her voice, she has become a guiding light for women, and especially those who keep saying yes when they want to say no. Yeah. So I'll not take much of your time, dear listeners, and we'll quickly jump into the discussion with Bob. And Bob, I'm really, really thrilled to have you here today. Let's get into it. Welcome to the show again.
Sounds good.
Lovely, lovely. So, Bob, this question, like, why is it so hard for people, especially women, like, to say no? It's
hmm
just a two-letter word, no. But
Yeah.
so, what is happening underneath that fear of disappointing others?
Yeah. I think that a lot of it is acculturation. It doesn't mean that men don't have these issues as well as women, but I
Mm,
think it's harder for women because women are very much acculturated to be like the giver, the caregivers, the nurturers, the caretakers, the helpers. I've actually had a number of private
mm,
clients who are from Southeast Asia, and I think it's especially true for the oldest daughter in the family,
mm,
such families, because it's just the role. Your role is basically kind of like to be an assistant to your parents and to be the
yeah.
go-to person for the rest of the siblings. And when you have been acculturated to that, it feels selfish. And there's something about that word selfish that I think is especially difficult for women to handle. We act like it's a swear word or something if you call a woman selfish. And the reality is that saying no to other people, saying yes to yourself and to the things that you enjoy is not selfish. Saying, I'm never going to help you again with anything ever, go take care of your own needs, that's selfish. But saying, you know what, I'm not going to be there today because I'm going to go do this thing that I want, that is not selfish. And so, just to take a little quick aside, Avik,
Mm,
before I got in recovery, I volunteered for something like 15 different nonprofit organizations. I was like always giving, giving, giving. And I thought of myself as a volunteeraholic. Well, now that I'm in recovery, now that I have healthy boundaries, I actually donate more hours per week in community service than I ever did before when I was a volunteeraholic. But it's because I do it strategically rather than at the drop of a hat. I do it by choice. I don't do it because I feel compelled or I feel a sense of obligation. And I do it after filling my cup first. So I've heard this notion that we want to pour from the overflow rather than from an empty cup. Well, the only way you have an overflow is if you fill your cup yourself. So
mm,
I'm living proof is that becoming like having healthy boundaries and learning to know what your limits are and what's important and what's not does not make you a selfish person. I'm actually able to give very strategically. And the vast majority of my community service goes into 12-step recovery. But I spend time every week one-on-one with individuals who are trying to recover from whatever it is, the program that I'm in.
Mm.
So I hope that answers your question.
Exactly. Exactly. And when someone recognizes this pattern in themselves,
Mhm.
uh, what's the very first step towards breaking it?
Yeah, I think well, there's 2 ways I would answer that. If you were doing my private coaching program, I would have you start by identifying your top 5 values and use those to anchor your boundaries.
Mm.
But if you're just someone on the street who wants to get started working on boundaries, I
Mm.
think that the place to start is with yourself. So we tell ourselves something like, I am not going to look at my email from work after 6 p.m. And then we follow through on that. So setting boundaries with yourself first, because no one else is involved and you're the one that's going to get the repercussions. So if you tell yourself, I'm not looking at my email until after 6 p.m. during the week, and you violate that boundary, you get the repercussion of dealing with all the stuff that happens in your mind and in your from doing it. But when you actually put the phone down and don't answer the emails after 6 p.m., you get the freedom of having an evening to yourself. And the more like when we start building boundaries, Avik, we make mistakes. It's an experimental process. Just like when you learn how to drive a car or ride a bicycle, you didn't do it right the first time. And in the beginning, especially in the very beginning, you have to pay very close attention to every detail of if you're driving a car, where's my foot on the pedal? Did I put on my seatbelt? Is the mirror right? Or if you're on a bicycle, how do I balance? Am I ready to take the training wheels off? But as time goes on, you don't even think about it. You just do it. And it's the same thing with boundaries, but somehow there's something about building boundaries that people think that they should be able to do it right immediately. And that's just not right. And then I would say, once you've done a little bit with yourself, then you wanna go to setting a boundary with another person. I recommend doing it with a very good-natured person. So not the most difficult person in your life,
Yeah.
but someone who's like a reasonable, like emotionally mature, good-natured
Mm.
person. And you just say something like, "I can't make it," or "I'm not gonna be there," or, "Let me think about it." Just
Mm.
start like that. Because what's gonna happen is you're gonna have all these feelings come up. Typically, they're feelings of guilt and shame for
Mm.
putting yourself first or being selfish or something. And learning how to deal with those feelings is a huge part of the boundary building process because the reason we cave and give in after we've set a boundary is because we can't handle the feelings that are coming up. That's why learning how to manage those feelings. So I do a lot of feelings work with my clients. So those are some steps to get started.
Got it. Got it. And okay. And I think like so many listeners are nodding along right now because
Yeah.
that pull to please others feels so automatic. And
Mhm.
yeah, definitely. What you're saying highlights that it is something that we
Yeah.
can unlearn. So
Right.
yeah.
Right, and what I wanna say about that, like, I didn't even know that I was a people pleaser. I don't think I heard the term people pleaser until I got in recovery, and when I first heard it,
Mm.
I didn't think it applied to me, and now I know that I was just in denial. And so we want to please people,
Yeah.
but we don't consider pleasing ourselves. Like, we get to be included in the people we want to please. And I think
Right.
if I were to say there was one core thing, one core shift that happened for me to go from 50 something years of no boundaries to having such healthy boundaries that I now coach
Yeah.
people on it, it's, Avik, that I came to care more what I think about me than what other people do. Now, this does not mean I don't care what other people think. Of course I do. What it means is that I used to be willing to throw my integrity out the window and lie by saying yes to things I really didn't wanna do, acting like I liked things that I didn't, saying, like, volunteering for things that I really didn't wanna do, and then complaining about those people for taking advantage of me. And I'm no longer willing to do that. My integrity, I wanna be an honest woman of integrity, and that is more important to me than you liking me. So I want you to like me, but I don't like with clause need you to like me the way that the way that I did before because I'm really focused on being an honest woman of integrity. And because I'm an honest woman of integrity, which by the way, I thought I was before, but I wasn't,
mm,
I approve of me. So I've heard it said it's fine to seek other people's approval, but only if you have your own approval first. So if you're going to do something and you're going to feel terrible about yourself for doing it, please don't do it because
mm,
it's really hard to get your integrity back. But if you're going to do something seeking someone's approval and you feel great about it, go ahead and do it. But we get to be included in the people whose approval we seek and the people that we wanna please.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And like you have said before, that boundaries are not about controlling others, but about teaching them how to treat us.
Mhm.
So, I mean, if you can just explain that. Just,
Yeah. Yeah, so, okay, I'll do it by giving an example. This is not a boundary. You can't call me after 8 o'clock at night. That's not a boundary. This is a
mm,
boundary. I will not be answering the phone if you call me after 8 o'clock at night. So, I can't stop someone from calling me after 8 o'clock at night. They can call whenever they want, but what I can do is control me, which is what am I gonna do if they call, which is not answer the phone. Personally, I turn the ringer off on my phone. My ringer is off almost at all times because I used to get annoyed that people were texting me at all hours of the day, and don't they know that I'm busy? And I acted like they were interrupting me, and then I was like, "Wait a minute, I'm the one interrupting me." If I turn the ringer off, then I can look at my text messages when I have the bandwidth, when I have the psychic space to do it rather than every time my phone dings. So we can't control other people, but we can influence other people. So,
yeah.
I think actually, I want to give you an example. I was working full time at Yale University when I got into 12-step recovery
Mm,
and started building boundaries. And I saw this ripple effect of my
okay.
building boundaries on my team. And I remember thinking like, "Wait a minute, none of them are in recovery. What's happening here?" And it just goes to show that when one person changes the dynamics of their interactions with those around them, it changes things around them. So things will change. You can't stop people from doing things, but you can stop responding when they do things.
Mm,
So, you can't get someone like I grew up in a really loud family, and I can't yelling is very disturbing to me, and so when I started building boundaries, I thought I could go to my brother who talks
mm,
very, very loud and say to him, "My ears are hurting, please talk quieter," and he could remember for 2 seconds, and he kept doing it, and so I finally realized, I kept repeating it, and then I realized, "Oh, this is me trying to control him." So, I can't stop him from talking loudly. What can I do? Well, I can spend less time with him or no time, or I can spend time less frequently with him, which is precisely what I did. I spent less time with him less frequently. And because I just couldn't deal with it. So I can't turn him into someone who doesn't talk loudly, but I can put boundaries in place to protect myself and my peace so that his loudness isn't as disturbing to me.
mm, wow. What a lovely said. Yeah, definitely. And like, uh, if I say it this way, that what's simple thing? I mean, um, like you have found your turning point through 12-step recovery, right? So after decades of therapy and the self-help. So why do you think that recovery reached you in a way those other tools didn't?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked me that question because I would say I would call the 12 steps of recovery an incredible technology for personal change. And I think there's three main reasons. Number one, there's a system. It's a stepwise program, steps 1 through 12 that you do in order.
Mhm.
Number two, it is a group program. So you were in a program with other people like you, some of whom have been on the path longer than you, some have not. and you get to hear actual stories from people about their own lives and their own transformation. Sometimes in the beginning, they're not talking about their transformation, they're talking about the yucky stuff of their life. And you identify with these people. And sometimes when you hear people tell stories, you recognize things about yourself that you would never have come up with on your
Mm,
own. But they're like, oh my God, you just put words to my experience that I could have never done. And you're a model for me about what's possible. And I have all these teachers in the room
mm,
that say, I'm not telling you you should do this, but here's what I did. Maybe it'll work. And number three, 12-step recovery programs are spiritual programs, which means there's a recognition that we are part of something larger than ourselves. And so we often talk about a higher power in 12-step recovery. For many people, higher power is God, but not for everybody. But the idea is that, my problem is that I have a lack of power. I have not been able to make the changes in my life that I want to make. So I have a lack of power. Well, what's the solution when you have a lack of power? Well, it's more power or a power greater than yourself. So I think the fact that it's a stepwise program, it's a group program, and it's a
mm,
spiritual program has everything to do with it. And the other thing is that it's an action-oriented program. I was in therapy for decades. They never gave
right.
me homework. They never gave me a worksheet. They never gave me tools. And I learned so many tools in my first like 2 to 3 years in recovery. This is the reason why I started my podcast, honestly. It never occurred to me it would have to do with my business because I was like, I learned none of this stuff. I learned none of these things about myself
Mm,
until I got in recovery. How do we get this wisdom from 12 steps
yeah.
of recovery out into the world? So now I've been doing the podcast for 6.5 years. I have over 300 episodes, 40 something of which are about boundaries because I want to share what I've learned in recovery with the world. Whether you're in recovery or not, there's some wisdom there.
Mm, definitely. Wow. And wow. I mean, I really love that. I mean, like what you're saying really challenges the idea that willpower and self-help books alone can fix the deep-rooted patterns.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are probably some out there. I mean, I would call well, I mean, 12-step recovery, we call it self-help. It's not, it's group help. It's group help and higher power help. So, I mean, I've read some really profound books that have changed things for me. But
Mm,
like so and I also I would say I find this as a coach too that so many
mm,
people that I work with have even been in 12-step recovery for years and they just can't make the
mm,
shift when it comes to boundaries, and working with me keeps them accountable. They also have someone who's feeding back to them, "Here's what I'm seeing from you." And, like, I give them tools and I give them exercises and stuff. Same thing happens in 12-step recovery. In most programs, you get a sponsor, which is someone who has been on the path before you, has typically worked all 12 steps, and has maintained their recovery in that program, and they shepherd you along the journey, and so you have someone and you have accountability. So I think,
mm,
when you read a book, good luck with implementation because it's the
mm,
implementing it and then integrating that change into your beingness that is the hard part. Well, the thing about 12-step recovery is like you go to meetings regularly, you have a community. It's like you have this community wrapped around you. It's hard to let go of it unless you stop going to meetings. When you work one-on-one with a coach, you're going to follow through. You're paying for it. So you're not going to just not
yeah.
show up and not do the work. So I think that yeah, books are great.
Mm,
Courses are great. I really I've taken a lot of online courses. I've only finished 2 of them, and that was because I was in a coaching program that those courses were part of. And I'm a doer. I'm a follow through person, and I've
mm.
still not followed through on courses. I'm one of those many people that buy a course and don't finish it.
That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And uh, so, like, this might sound contradictory, but it's actually not. Like, some people argue that too many boundaries can make someone rigid or selfish. So,
Mhm.
how do you respond to that?
Yeah, so those are not those do not tend to be the kind of people I work with. So, actually, I was just talking about this last week with somebody, and I said, "You've got the person with poor boundaries, that's the steamroller.
Mhm.
They don't care about anybody else, and they just, like, they violate other people's boundaries all over the place." And then there's the people who get steamrolled. I work with people who tend to be that get steamrolled. I don't tend to work with people who are the steamrollers, who have such rigid boundaries, which means things should be done
Mhm.
my way or the highway. If you don't like it,
Yeah.
then leave. Like, that's what I'm talking about. So I tend to, I work with the steamrolled as opposed to the steamrollers. Though it's possible you could be a steamroller and not know it. So,
Mm.
and I would say, like, one of the, like, when I started learning about this whole thing about boundaries, I didn't even know what they were. And I started to see I knew that I was being, like, overgiving and, accommodating and people pleasing and rescuing and fixing and all that stuff. And that became clear pretty quickly. What I didn't know was that I was violating other people's boundaries. I wouldn't call me a steamroller. I don't think it was
Mhm.
quite to that level. Um, I'm sorry, my alarm went off.
No,
I
sure.
wouldn't call it quite to that level. However, I didn't realize that I was often not listening to people. I was being a little too forceful. And it was because I learned if I wanted to get my way, I had to shout. I told you I grew up in a loud family. Like, the loudest person got heard. And I don't do that anymore. So you could be I don't know what else to other analogy besides steamroller. Let's call it steamroller light. Okay. So you could
Okay.
be like me and be like the steamrolled, and you could also be like me and be like steamroller light. And I think that's true to a certain degree for most people who have poor boundaries. They don't realize that they're also violating others. And I want to say, like, when you're getting steamrolled, you have a responsibility for that. It's not just that they're driving a steamroller, it's that you're on their road. Like, you can step out of the way. You can stop going to that town even, to extend this metaphor further. Like, if people can't take advantage of you if you don't give them the advantage. I really actually like that better because people don't
Mhm.
take advantage from you. You give it to them and then you keep giving it to them. And then what happens often is we develop victim mentality and we feel like we can't do anything about it. And that for me, honestly, was the biggest paradigm shift of my recovery was number one, understanding that I had victim mentality and then coming out of it. And I always felt like a powerful woman of agency. I never felt like I was a wallflower that people were walking all over me. But as part of my recovery, it was like, oh my goodness, if you engage in if only thinking all the time, if you do a lot of complaining and you do a lot of blaming, then those are hallmarks of victim mentality. And that happens
Mm.
when we get steamrolled all the time.
Exactly. Wow. So, wow, amazing, amazing, and like, like, also, I mean, let me push a little here. Like, some people might say that resilience often means toughing it out, um, and not drawing the lines. So, why not just push through instead of setting the boundaries?
Mm. Yeah, I wouldn't call that resilience. I would call that being a pushover. Like, resilience is strength. Resilience is health. Resilience is vitality. When you are constantly bending over backwards for other people and just giving into what everybody else does and says, that's not strength. That's not vitality. That's not health. I mean, we do it for survival a lot of times. Like, we wouldn't have made it out of our childhoods if we didn't bend over backwards and stuff like that. But I would not call that resilience at all.
Hmm. Okay. And what would you say to someone who equates the boundaries with the weakness or kind of lack of commitment?
I would say they have different values than I do.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, I worked at Yale University. There's a lot of high achievers at Yale University, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people have really poor boundaries. They just abuse themselves. What kind of a life do you wanna have? Do you wanna have the kind of a life where at the end of the day, you're like, "Oh, I wish I took more time off of work?"
Mm,
Like, or like, you're not gonna be on your deathbed saying, "I wish I worked more hours. I wish I crafted more emails. I wish I went without more sleep." Like, what kind of life do you wanna have? If you wanna have the kind of life where hustle and grind feels good to you, have at it, but that's not what I value. And I find what happens, we talk about, at least in this country, I don't know about in India, we talk about midlife crisis. Midlife crisis is people getting to the middle of their life and they're being like, wait a minute, I did all the things and I don't
mm,
feel the way that I thought I was going to feel. And usually people make changes and they're not changes to learn how to hustle and grind more. They're changes to learn how to like slow down and be intentional and live authentically and start telling people the truth about what's okay and what's not okay. So if you like hustle and grind, you go ahead and do it. That's not for me.
exactly. Yeah. So looking back, like you have transformed not only your relationship with others, but with yourself. So if you could give one message to the version of you who didn't yet know like how to set boundaries, then what would it be?
You matter.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So I do have another call, Avik. I'm so sorry. I
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
Sure. Sure. So that's lovely. And Bob, thank you so much for bringing such
Oh,
clarity and
thank
heart
you
to
for
the
inviting
conversation.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you really
Yeah.
ask great questions and you have made me be
Yeah.
quite thoughtful, and I so appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And dear listeners, I'll put all the details in the show notes for easy reference. And with this hope, until next time, keep choosing pleasure, keep choosing truth, and most importantly, keep choosing you. So
Yes.
thank you so much.
Thank you.